Transportation Committee to order, and members Martin, Thompson, Washinsky, Friedrich, Smith, and Johnston are all present, and we have a quorum.
Yes.
And we have one truck driver who resigned, and we need to fill the vacancy.
Do I have a
Motion
motion?
by Washinsky,
Thank you.
seconded by Thompson, that we hire a replacement truck driver. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The Transportation Committee then is adjourned.
Thank you. Susan, you have everyone, I believe, hang on one second. I don't see Sharon Chung. But other than that,
I
you
do
have,
not see Carlo. Oh, there he is. Okay.
as I point like
Okay,
you.
thank you. All right, I'd like to call the stand-up meeting of the Health Committee to order. We have all members here except I don't see Member Chung, like Ms. Morlock said. We have an item for action as approve a critical hire request, and I'll take a motion on that. Motion by Metzger, second by Robustelli. Any discussion, any questions on that? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Raise your hand, please. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Finance. Mr. Soldner, it looks like you have everybody present. You can start when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Finance Committee has one item tonight. It's C1A, request a Class C raffle license request for the American Legion. I would entertain a motion. Member Erickson, second member Beard. Any questions or discussion? Does the administration have anything to add?
No, it's a standard application and they met all the requirements.
Okay, ready to vote? All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, it looks like you have everyone but Miss Bloomfield. I don't see her.
There she is.
There she is.
She just came in.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have,
You're George. Now you're back on.
yep, thank you. Sometimes the computer has a mind of its own, doesn't it? I'd like to call this stand-up meeting of the Justice Committee to action. To order, excuse me. We have two items for action on our stand-up agenda. Item D1A, request approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Department of Health Care and Family Services for the state's attorney's office, found on pages 11 through 34, and I'll entertain a motion. Moved by member Martin, seconded by member Bloomfield. Questions, comments, or discussion on this motion?
I'll say, State's Attorney Don Knapp is here if there are questions.
Thank you. Don, glad you're here. Are there any questions for the state's attorney? Hearing none. If we're ready to vote, all those in favor of recommending approval of item D1A, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Item D1B, request approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Department of Health Care and Family Services for the Circuit Clerk's Office, pages 35 through 54, and I'll entertain a motion. Moved by member Bloomfield, seconded by member Robustelli. Questions, comments, or discussion? Ms. Morlock, is there anyone here from the circuit clerk's office?
No, sir, but they are watching and we can text them if there are any questions that we can't answer.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, and so on? Hearing none. All those in favor of recommending approval of item D1B, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. That has been approved and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, George. John, you have everybody, you're ready to go.
All people present. Call to order the meeting of the executive committee. We have a number of items for action. First of all, item E1A, approval of critical hire request found on pages 55 and 56. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by member Barnett. Is there a second? Second by member Gordon. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please say aye, raise your hand. Okay. 6, 7, 8. You have everybody here. Motion's carried. Next item, E1B, request for consideration pursuant to section 2013E of the McLean County Code of Item 4H1A from May 12, 2020, McLean Executive Committee meeting. Request approval of an ordinance of McLean County Board setting salaries of the members of the McLean County Board, the County Administrator's Office, found on pages 57 for 59. Is there a motion? Motion by member Gordon. Is there a second? Anyone? Second by member Barnett. Comments or questions?
Point of order on this, doesn't the reconsideration need to be the people that did the motion and seconding from the original motion?
I don't believe so, just somebody who voted in favor of it.
Member Gordon, and who was the second?
Barnett,
Member Barnett.
everyone voted in favor of it before, so.
All right, so we're okay. Thank you. Any discussion? Member Metzger?
So I want to be clear, we are going back to the 2018 approved amounts. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes. Anyone else? Member Kaisley? Oh, I can hardly say his name. Yeah.
Yes, I am opposed to this. I think that we need to give a modest raise to both the coroner and to the clerk of the circuit court. Their duties are increasing rather than diminishing. And I think that these figures were set as a kind of a reaction to the Corona situation. And I think that it's most unfortunate. We're going to set salaries for the next 4 years at the present levels and with no possibility of giving them a raise. And I think that that's not fair.
Okay, Member Kaisley, if you read through this one, this is approval for county board members' salaries. Is there any other discussion?
I do not oppose that.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Member Barnett?
I believe Member Gordon was ahead of me, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you for that observation. Member Gordon? Member Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this a motion simply to reconsider? I thought that I read this as a procedural motion.
Let me, I think, and you know, that it was found, it was discovered, I think we sent out an email, I did, it was discovered that it wasn't necessary to vote for that. And maybe, are you saying that we're not doing this properly? Basically, there wasn't a vote that was necessary for the first time. So we're basically just reconsidering to pull this off and go back to the original salaries of 2 years ago.
So you want to
Okay.
vote no?
Everybody
You
wants
want,
to vote no.
yeah, you want to
So
vote no.
everyone needs to vote no, so we're not reconsidering the salaries. Thank you for that explanation, folks. Okay? So I'm sorry, Member Barnett.
So I guess just to clarify one step further, by doing this, we are not giving ourselves raises and the salaries of county board members are staying flat.
If they vote no.
Correct.
If you vote
If you
no.
vote no.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure that everyone clearly understood that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, a yes vote is to reconsider, no vote is not reconsidering. We're going to keep our salaries as was voted on in 2018. All in favor? Raise your hand. This is a yes vote. And opposed? Same sign. No votes. 1, 2, 3. Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's move on. Request approval of software enhancement with Caliber Public Safety. And I think I combined C and D, request approval of emergency appropriation ordinance, amending the McLean County fiscal year 2020 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance for information technologies. This time, Mr. Nelson is here. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Member Metzger, second by Member Schaefer. Any comments or questions on items C and D? Member Woolram?
Was Mr. Nelson able to find out whether there's any chance that we wouldn't have to upgrade this year?
I was able to contact the FBI, and I received contacts back from 2 people there. The first one was Dreama Fouch, who is the NIBRS coordinator on behalf of the FBI. And the second one was James Troublestedt, who is the works in the FBI CJIS division. They both clearly expressed that they were not going to be moving the date. I also received that same confirmation from Jason Stamps at the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority.
Thank you very, very much for doing that legwork. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions? If hearing none, I'll take a vote on items C and D. All in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? And motion carried. Let's go on to item E, request approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services for the State Attorney's Office. And that's the item on page 72, I believe, yes.
No, it's referred to above.
Referred to above on D1. Okay.
11.
Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Member Woolraff, second by Member Casely. Comments, questions, or discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? I'm having trouble seeing. My motion has carried. We'll move on to the item F. Request approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services for the Circuit Clerk's Office. Motion by Member Gordon, second by Member Casely. Comments or questions? If none, please raise your hand if you are in favor. And opposed? Motion's carried. Next is item G, request for McLean County to participate in a downstate business stabilization program. Is there a motion? Motion by Member Gordon, second by Member Chung. Comments or questions?
Oh, not Chung.
I'm sorry, were you not raising your hand? I need a second to Member Gordon's motion. Motion by Member Woolraff. Comments or questions? All in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? Motion is carried. Item H is request approval of a letter to the Federal Health and Human Services and State of Illinois Department of Public Health requesting that the pilot community-based testing site remain open. Is there a motion? Motion by member Barnett, second by member Wolrab. Comments or questions?
I also updated the letterhead, if anybody wonders.
Okay, the letterhead has since been updated.
Mhm.
Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? Motion is carried. Last item I, request approval of a resolution of McLean County Board continuing the declaration of emergency pursuant to section 11 of the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by member Schaefer, second by member Erickson. Comments, questions? All in favor, please raise your hand. I'm sorry, member Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question. So this will continue until June the 17th. I guess my question is, what happens if we're able to reopen before that? Seems to me that's, that's a whole month. I don't know, maybe if there's a rationale behind that. I guess I just would like to hear that.
I have an answer, but I'll go ahead. I'll
No,
defer to you.
Member Soldner, this is Camille, and of course, one of the reasons why we would want to continue with the Emergency Operations Center is that even if our county were in a phase of whichever plan is chosen to reopen, it's my estimation that the activities currently performed in that Emergency Operations Center, for example, providing protective personal equipment to our first responders and medical personnel, that would still likely be needed for some time. So that's just one example of why the coordination between those entities might still be imperative.
So in other words, this just pretty much allows us to keep using the emergency management group then.
That is one part of it, yes, sir. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Did I have a motion second?
You did, Schaefer Erickson.
All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Say aye if you'd like. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. I have nothing else. And this stand-up meeting of the executive committee is adjourned. And that's exactly what I was going to say.
I'm sorry, I took your thunder.
And it's after 5:30, so you can start board whenever you would like, sir.
I need to know, if we, Julie, I'm, who's speaking for United Way? No?
Okay, your mic, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and I'll call to order this Tuesday, May 19th, 2020, regular meeting of the McLean County Board. At this time, we please rise for the invocation by member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings you have bestowed upon this great county of ours. We pray for your protection. We pray for those with the coronavirus, that you bring healing to their bodies and peace to their hearts. We pray that you will continue to protect those on the front lines. Too many to mention here, but you know them. We ask that your hand protects them. Your word instructs us to pray for those in authority. Lord, we ask that you would give the members of this board, our town and city councils, the General Assembly, Congress and our governor and president, guidance, wisdom, insight, courage, strength, and humility. We pray for our meeting tonight. While we may disagree, we can respectfully agree to disagree. I believe this is what you ask of us. We pray that we will do what we know to be right, that we will consider all views with dignity and respect. And Lord, I love the words of Abraham Lincoln, and while they spoke of a time much more grave than ours, I offer them to you as I finish this prayer tonight. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, for his widow and his orphan, and to do all which may achieve and cherish just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. In Jesus' name.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
Which stands one nation under God,
with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
This time we'll call roll.
Jack Barnett,
Present.
Jacob Beard,
Present.
Lindsay Bloomfield,
Present.
William Casely,
Present.
Sharon Chung,
Present.
Chuck Erickson,
Present.
William John Friedrich,
Present.
George Gordon,
Present.
Elizabeth Johnston,
Present.
Randall Martin,
Present.
Catherine Metzger,
Present.
Carlo Robustelli,
Present.
Susan Schaefer,
Here.
Logan Smith,
Here.
James Soldner,
Here.
Gerald Thompson,
I see him.
I see him. Okay.
There he's on.
Frantically clicking the wrong space. I'm here present, thank you.
Shayna Wachinski,
Here.
George Wendt,
Present.
Lori Woolrab,
Here.
and John McIntyre. You have all 20.
Present, we have 20 members. Present, no one absent. We do have a quorum. We're going on to item 5 on our agenda, appearance and members from the public. And this time, we will be reading letters as they were submitted in the order in which they were submitted. Our board rules allow for 15 minutes for letters to be read. All letters that are submitted will be placed on file and in our minutes. And Ms. Morlock is going to graciously read these letters for you. Thank you.
And please forgive me if I end up having to reach forward for water or something. The first comment that we received was from Radiance Campbell. Good evening. I realize that I have emailed you all before and that you are getting many emails about this topic. I hope it is clear that we will not give up on our most vulnerable community members that need us to ask these questions and persist until you give us answers. My name is Radiance Campbell, and I am submitting a public comment today as a recent ISU grad and longtime resident of Bloomington. I have been actively attending the People's COVID-19 response team calls and serving on the organizing team. We have been meeting for over 8 weeks to urge our elected officials to take action to protect our most vulnerable community members amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. So far, we've received limited response from you, our elected officials. The county board has claimed that there is a housing plan, but it's been over a month since you've made that claim and no plan has been made public. We submitted a FOIA request and have learned that there is no plan. We want a plan, and we want the plan to include these 3 things. individuals who have tested positive and require isolation but are unable to isolate properly in their current living environment, individuals who are asymptomatic but who require quarantining because they have been exposed, individuals who live in congregated living conditions and are therefore at high risk for negative outcomes from COVID, such as individuals who currently live in shelters. Additionally, while there is no housing plan, there is also no action to protect another one of our most vulnerable population, incarcerated people. Instead, a FOIA request has revealed that many of the people in the jail right now are being held pre-trial, and a judge has said they would be free to go if they could pay their bond. On top of that, the county is making a profit off of the pandemic and those who cannot afford their bond by way of expensive phone and video calls. What makes leaders stand out is their willingness to act boldly and fast, rather than waiting for their citizens or social services to do or not to do the work of their own. I am eagerly awaiting the day you, my elected officials, step up as leaders and fulfill your responsibilities in this historic moment. Thank you for your time and attention, Radiance Campbell. Number 2, my name is Kimberly Jackson. I have lived my entire life in McLean County. I own and run a small business locally, and I'm also a very health-oriented person. I know that we have many tough decisions ahead, but I feel like there is a balanced way to approach a locally oriented reopening that can have all of McLean County residents' health and well-being in mind. The 5-phase approach mandated by Governor Pritzker does not seem to be taking into account our local climate concerning this COVID-19 virus, nor our basic constitutional rights. The only way for us to move through this is to immediately begin this opening process. Businesses can be instructed to open in a thoughtful and safe way, utilizing social distancing, face coverings, and sanitation practices. It makes 0 sense to herd the community into the big box stores and groceries when small businesses can have way more control over occupancy and sanitation. Please stand up for your community and immediately begin a phased-in approach that will take all health and well-being into consideration. Thank you. Number 3, my name is Neil Iden, and I'm a resident of McLean County. I have been working as a social worker and advocate for the homeless for the last 3 years. I have worked with John McIntyre in my role as president of NAMI, Mid-Central Illinois. Logan Smith and William Casely are my representatives. I am writing to ask for your support of an emergency housing program. Our community cannot continue to ask our overstretched social services to shoulder the burden of emergency housing without financial support. I am asking for the publication of an emergency plan that houses 3 groups: individuals who have tested positive and require isolation but are unable to isolate properly in their current living environment, individuals who are asymptomatic but who require quarantining because they have been exposed, individuals who live in congregated living conditions and are therefore at high risk for negative outcomes from COVID, such as individuals who currently live in shelters. Individuals experiencing homelessness in McLean County have so far been protected. However, the previous week has seen our active cases jump up by 25%. The shelters have been operating on skeleton crews and have been forced to turn away people in need to reduce COVID risk. These people need an alternative option besides sleeping outside. I have read your requests for names and phone numbers for these individuals, which is simply not an option as professionals are bound by confidentiality. Not only that, but active phone service for someone sleeping outside is far from guaranteed. I would ask what you would even do with those details, even if I could provide them. Please be the leaders we need in this dark time. Publish and initiate an emergency housing plan. Protect the people most in need. Number 4, members of the McLean County Board. In your role as elected officials, decisions are often very tough. Delaying on important ones can have devastating effects for more than those of whom are subject to the issue. We must reopen business in America, but most importantly, McLean County. We need revenue to survive. A few years back, I almost died of a virus. Today, I live with the lingering effects of heart failure, but I am out traveling, not wearing a useless mask, working and living. I have been in 2 hemispheres, 6 major cities, 5 international airports, and attended 2 conventions since January, while living in the shadow of virus-infected heart failure. Everyone should have the choice to live the way they choose, not by government mandate. Know this, many more will die from this virus despite government mandates, just like they still do from H1N1. H1N1 took 575,000 global deaths. We did not shut down. C virus has taken 275,000 global deaths, and we are shut down. This is an overreaction. We must return to a full open society immediately, and like other issues of choice, let those afraid or at high risk choose to stay at home. I am a high-risk person choosing to live life not under a rock. Open up now. Steve Hosselton. Number 5. I'm extremely disappointed by the way our governor is handling the COVID-19 virus situation. The number of cases we have here are very low. The death rate is very low and the recovery rate is very high. Our healthcare providers aren't overwhelmed and are actually being hurt by the restrictions on services they can provide. This is not Chicago. We just don't have the risk down here that they have in the city. The shutdowns being imposed don't make sense for the risk level, and the damage being done is just too great. Please, let's just use a little common sense and do the right thing for the people of McLean County. No more needless hardship because of petty politics. Jeff Flessner. Number 6. I would like to thank you for serving our McLean County. My name is Janice Brown and I live in Bloomington. I am concerned about people that don't have a safe place to shelter. I feel it is a disservice to all of McLean County if this isn't a priority. We need a COVID-19 emergency plan for housing for those in need. Thank you, Janice Brown. Number 7. Sorry, I get out of, you know what I mean? My name is Jeffrey, and I'm going to say Siwek, S-I-W-E-K. I hope I'm saying that right. And I'm submitting a public comment today as a concerned community member who has been attending the People's COVID-19 Response Team calls. We have been meeting for over 8 weeks to urge our elected officials to take action to protect our most vulnerable community members amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. So far, we've received limited response from you, our elected officials. The county board has claimed that there is a plan, but it's been over a month since you've made that claim and no plan has been made public. We submitted a FOIA request and have learned that there is no plan. We want a plan and we want the plan to include these 3 things. Individuals who have tested positive and require isolation but are unable to isolate properly in their current living environment. Individuals who are asymptomatic but who require quarantining because they have been exposed. Individuals who live in congregated living conditions and are therefore at high risk for negative outcomes from COVID, such as individuals who currently live in shelters. I urge you as our elected officials to take action. This is an issue that needs to be addressed. Thank you. Number 8, public comment by Dawn Dannenbring. For 2 months, the Illinois People's Action, Bloomington-Normal Democratic Socialists of America, and Black Lives Matter have tried to lay our hands on a vaguely referenced and elusive McLean County COVID-19 housing plan. On April 28th, we submitted a FOIA for the plan or any materials related to the plan. On May 6th, the same day that McLean County COVID cases surpassed 100, Illinois People's Action received a response to the FOIA. The results were encapsulated in 3 words: no responsive records. We now have more questions now than when we started. Is there really a COVID-19 emergency housing plan? If there is a plan, why is it secret? If there is a plan, is it proactive, meaning will it help prevent outbreak before it happens? Or is it reactive, where it would only go into effect after an outbreak has already occurred? If there is a plan, is it being used? By whom? Who gets to access the housing? If it isn't being used, why not? What are the triggers for initiating the plan? How can we be in the middle of a public health crisis and leave the public out of the planning and implementation process? We want a transparent and public plan similar to the COVID-19 housing plan that Peoria unveiled publicly on April 9th. Yes, Peoria has a plan. It should include the following at the minimum. Individual housing in local hotels will be available to 1, individuals who have tested positive and require isolation but are unable to isolate properly in their current living environment. 2, individuals who are asymptomatic but who require quarantining because they have been exposed. 3, individuals who live in congregated living conditions and are therefore at high risk for negative outcomes from COVID. such as individuals who currently live in shelters where they cannot adequately socially distance. At the time I am writing this, May 14th, 2020, there have been 136 cases of coronavirus in McLean County. That is more than a 25% increase from a week ago. People are getting sick, people are dying. 25 people are in home isolation right now. How many of those individuals are sharing housing with others who are in a high-risk group? Could they benefit from a plan with the components we support? We think so. We have heard that social services is dealing with the homeless population. That may be fine in non-pandemic circumstances, but COVID-19 has changed everything. The health aspects of a COVID-19 emergency housing plan must supersede the housing status aspects of the population being served by the plan. In other words, if everyone is safer in individual housing, then homeless people are also safer in individual housing. We need to make sure our housing plan addresses the need for all people to be in individual living spaces with their own bathrooms. We need a COVID-19 housing plan that includes everyone in our community. We need it now. Dawn Dannenbring, Illinois People's Action. Number 9.
Ma'am, you have 3 minutes and
Okay.
25 seconds left.
Thank you. Dear members of the board, I am Crichton Satterwhite. I live in the Arbor Apartments in Ward 8 under Jeff Crabbill. I am writing to demand a housing plan for all to safe shelter during these times. I am lucky enough to have a job where I can continue working from home during these times, and I am aware you do as well. I am asking you to think of those less fortunate than you. Think of those that have remained healthy but have lost their jobs during this time. The answer is not to force them back to work in dangerous environments. The answer is to give them a safe place to live. Nursing homes, public housing, and jails are all highly concentrated congregations of people where the sickness can spread quickly and silently. So those options are not viable answers. John McIntyre has stated that there are hotel rooms available for isolation purposes that are not being used. These rooms should be preemptively used as safe shelter for everyone in need before they get sick. If you do not find this a viable option, then release a plan that will tell the public that there are better options. A few you might want to consider are rent freezes, rent forgiveness, hotel rooms, repurposing local businesses that are currently closed, RV/trailer options, or assisting and expanding HSA. Make a plan, release the plan. It should not be that hard, nor have taken this long. I feel like I am talking to a 5-year-old when I say this, but failure to plan is planning for failure. We will not be safe until there is a vaccine or we establish herd immunity. Dr. Fauci testified before the Senate on Wednesday, May 13th, saying that if a vaccine is possible, it would still be well over a year away. McLean County population is over 170,000 with less than 200 sick. In order for herd immunity, we would need 60 to 70% recovered, which means roughly 110,000 sick and hundreds dead, meaning you need to plan for safe shelter for well over a year. I believe this is a very easy solution, and I know you have more than enough resources to keep your community safe. Please make and release a plan. It is quite literally the least that you can do. Thanks, Crichton.
1 minute and 11 seconds.
Okay, I'll do my best. Number 10, Chairman McIntyre and board members. My name is Don Carlson, a 23-year resident of McLean County and a member of Illinois People's Action. I wish to include the following as public testimony on your May 19th meeting. People expect government to step up in times of crisis, and especially during a once-in-a-lifetime public health emergency. The crisis management you must now adopt has to focus on at least 3 things. 1, take full responsibility in addressing the crisis. 2, be completely transparent and communicate all decision-making. 3, don't be afraid to take risks today because you fear possible future criticism. Think about these common sense steps of responsibility, communication, and risk-taking. There is no downside from doing too much, but the price for not doing enough will be measured in human suffering. Sadly, this board and its leadership appear to have failed all 3 tests. No one I know, myself included, have really any idea what steps my county government is taking or plans to take to address COVID-19 health and housing planning in action. As you have heard today, maybe you have an emergency housing plan. FOIA says you don't. If so, you intentionally have kept it a secret from the very people who would benefit from it. Maybe the plan is really just about
That's 15 minutes.
Tornadoes, nuclear emergencies, but maybe it isn't. Sorry. I also wanted to let you know I was able to get through most of 10 comments, but we had comments and the chairman asked me to go ahead and read this. We had a total of 54 comments submitted. There were 21 comments submitted regarding housing. You heard from Radiance Campbell, Neil Iden, Janice Brown, Jeffrey Sywick, Don Dannenberg, Crichton Satterwhite, and I started with Don Carlson. There were comments also submitted by Peter Kramer, Tammy Mance, Marlia White, Derek Lau, Candace Bird, Doug Hennessy, Diane Mather, Cecilia Long, Jeff Crabbill, Elizabeth Kosuth, Alita Diggins, Kate Brunk, Caroline Bartolone, and Robert Hoy. We then had 27 comments submitted for reopening McLean County. You heard from Kimberly Jackson, Steve Hosselton, and Jeffrey Fleschner. There were also comments from Tony Mayer, John Curda, Gerald and Ruth Pope, Kathy Judd. I'm sorry, this name I cannot say. It's Bashkim, last name Gizhoski. Mark Judd, a Donna who did not provide her last name, Carol Whitaker, Eric Epley, Victoria Hadley, Sandy Painter, Ann Wicker, Lisa Wilson, Christian Brown, Mandy Freed, Kyle Buchanan, Robert Garcia, Lisa Mayer, Jan Freed, Sarah Anderson, Laura Kodavatanti, Andrea Knight, Barry Chavez, Abby Rinkenberger. And lastly, we had 6 comments in regards to inmate privileges. Itzel, Jihan, Heidi Zimmerman, Olivia Butts, Louis Gosland, Erica Larkin, and Carolyn Bartolome. All the ones that I was not able to go through, they will be put in the minutes.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, sir.
much, Mrs. Morlock. Appreciate that yeoman's effort there very much. We'll move on now to item number 6, which is our consent agenda, which you have before you. What say you? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Please raise your hand. Member Friedrich, motion. Is there a second? Second by Member Barnett. Are there comments or questions? Member Robustelli, I believe you have your hand, please. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item 6EC. And also, I think Member Friedrich would like to say something. I think it looked like he was raising his hand to be motion.
Right,
but yeah, I want to pull item 6EC, please. Thank you.
Thank you. 6EC will be pulled from the consent agenda. And Member Friedrich.
Yeah, I just wanted to make you aware, Chairman, that my audio feed is coming in and out. And if I miss something, I'll text Miss Rodriguez to let her know. It seems to be working now, so I'm certain it's on my end, but I just wanted you to be aware of, if you didn't hear a response from me, I may be having technical difficulties. I apologize.
I have a motion by Member Friedrich then, because he had his hand up, I believe. Is there a second to the motion? Member Thompson? Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or discussion? If none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda with item 6EC pulled, please raise your hand. And opposed? There is one transfer ordinance. Item D requires 2/3 vote. Is there anyone who requests to have a dissenting vote on the transfer ordinances? Please raise your hand. If not, we'll consider the transfer ordinance as approved unanimously. And we will move on now to the next item, which is an approval of a resolution of congratulations and commendations. And I will take a moment and read this. This one's kind of close to my heart, so I'll be happy to do that. And we are on page 54 of your packet, McLean County Board Proclamation. Whereas May 14th marked Childhood Apraxia of Speech Day, during which awareness was raised throughout McLean County, Illinois, with childhood apraxia of speech, and extremely challenging speech disorder in children. And whereas childhood apraxia is a speech causes children to have significant difficulty learning to speak and is among the most severe speech deficits in children. And whereas without early intervention, appropriate, intensive, and frequent speech therapy, children with apraxia are placed at high risk for secondary impacts in reading, writing, spelling, and other school-related skills that diminish future independence and employment opportunities if not resolved or improved. And whereas it is imperative that greater public awareness of the disorder and that finders such as insurance providers, school districts, and policymakers recognize the critical need to provide adequate speech therapy and other services to minimize its impact. And whereas our highest respect goes to these children and their families for their effort, determination, and resilience in the face of such obstacles, now therefore be it resolved that the McLean County Board declares May 2020 as Apraxia Awareness Month, and citizens of McLean County and surrounds are encouraged to work within their communities to increase awareness and understanding of childhood apraxia of speech adopted by the McLean County Board this 19th day of May 2020. Thank you. I'll move on now. The report of the standing committees. First off is Executive Committee Chairman, Vice Chairman Solberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Executive Committee has many items here today. First one, 7A1A, request approval of the 2020 legislative program, comes from the Legislative Subcommittee, and I so move.
Motion by Vice Chairman Solder. Is there a second? Second by Member Johnston. Comments, questions, or discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Motion has carried.
Next item, 7A1B, request approval of a software enhancement with Caliper Public Safety Information through the Information Technology, and I so move.
Motion by Vice Chairman Soldner. Is there a second? Second by Member Schaefer. Comments, questions, or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried.
Next item is 7A1C, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2020 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance for Information Technologies Department, and I so move.
Motion by Chairman Soldner, second by Member Bloomfield. Comments, questions, or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed, the same. Motion is carried.
Next item is 7A1D, request approval of an amendment to the Bloomington-Normal Enterprise Zone Intergovernmental Agreement. I so move.
Motion by Chairman Soldner. Is there a second? Second by Member Barnett. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Next item, 7A1E, request approval of an ordinance authorizing boundary modifications to the area known as the Bloomington-Normal Enterprise Zone, and this is for the Ferrero expansion, and I make that motion.
Motion by Chairman Soldner. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Member Kaisley. Comments or questions? Member Kaisley.
Yes, I would like to have a study made of unused portions of the enterprise zone so that we will not be without sufficient space if we have another opportunity to attract another business in this community. And we are getting close to the maximum number of square miles that you can have in an enterprise zone. And so I would like somebody to undertake a study, perhaps the Regional Planning Commission,
Duly noted, and we'll pass that on to the Regional Planning Commission, also our Economic Development Council. Mr. Holden is with us. Thank you for joining us, sir. Anyone else? All in favor of the motion and the second, please raise your hand. Opposed? The motion has carried.
Next item, 7A1F, request approval of an abatement ordinance abating taxes on property purchased by the Rivian Automotive. I so move.
Motion by Chairman Solner, second. Second by Member Woolrab. Comments or questions? All in favor, please raise your hand. And please keep it up a minute. Thank you. And opposed? Motion does carry. Thank you.
Next item is 7A1A, request approval of an abatement ordinance abating taxes on property purchased by Brandt Industries, and I so move.
Motion by Vice Chairman Solner, a second please by Member Smith. Comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Member Solner.
Yes, since this was, packet was put out, there'd been a change. I think members were sent that change by Jessica Woods. It was kind of on the way that calculated the amount of property taxes abatement. So what I would like to do is make a substitute motion to adopt this ordinance abating the levy of the 2019 property taxes for Brandt Industries USA Limited and Brandt Properties USA Limited in accordance with the 2017 Economic Incentive Agreement. I hope everyone has that.
Is there anyone that does not have that in their possession? Thank you. There's a substitute motion for this. Is there a second? Second by Member Smith. Is there comments or questions? No clarification is needed. Thank you very much. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Thank you very much. I have a little difficulty seeing some hands. Bear with me. Member Solder, you still have the floor.
Okay, so now that is all that the finance has in our agenda, although Member Robustelli did pull E1C. I guess this is the appropriate time to do that then. Request approval of a letter to the Federal Health and Human Services, State of Illinois Department of Public Health, requesting that the pilot community-based testing site remain open. I make that motion.
Motion by Chairman Solner. Is there a second? Second by Member Erickson. Comments or questions? Member Robustelli?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on this. I'm going to enthusiastically support this letter, but I do think it's important for us to use this as an opportunity also to talk a little bit about what we can do locally, in addition to the hope that the federal and state government will continue to provide this level of testing. With all due deference to the agency with whom this is their primary responsibility, which is our health department and the Board of Health, I would just ask our representative on the Board of Health to please convey the very urgent need that we have a local plan that deals with testing capacity. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to execute it, but I think it's really important if we're going to think about how we're going to start as we go through the reopening process. An absolutely essential component of that is going to be testing capacity. And this letter is important in terms of stating our position with the agencies that have provided that testing, but we're going to have to come up with solutions and have local, some kind of local plan in order for us to have the capacity that we need. So I just wanted to share that point of view with the board and to ask Member Schaefer if she would to please ask the Board of Health to take up this topic and to come back to us with some plan, with some vision for what this would look like. And that could include, for example, the barriers to meeting the testing capacity we need, or funding challenges, whatever it is. I think we need to be able to demonstrate that testing capacity is as critical as it is for reopening the community, because that is how we'll be able to reopen successfully, regardless of the plan that is used. So I want to thank those that authored this. I think it's excellent. And I just wanted to make that push to our representative. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's duly noted for the record. Anyone else? Member Schaefer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just kind of wanted to respond to Mr. Robustelli on that. And yes, that was talked about, I think, a little bit at our Board of Health meeting. It has also been talked about in conversations between Board of Health members after the meeting. And that concern has been very much expressed to the Health Department Administrator, and it is going to be a topic for our meeting on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Chung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also wanted to really enthusiastically talk about, I guess, this letter that was drafted. I actually heard from a constituent this week who owns a business in the district in which I serve, and he spoke about how important it was that we keep the testing site open, especially as we are speaking about reopening parts of our community. That testing is so important to keep track of who is infected, who is not infected, and so I just wanted to add that to the record. And also, can Member Schaefer or somebody clarify what time the Board of Health meeting is happening this week? Because I know they met last week, but I understand there's a new meeting. So if somebody can do that, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, our meeting is scheduled for 5:30 on Thursday.
Did I take a vote? I didn't.
No.
I need to take a vote on this. All in favor of this letter, please raise your hand. As submitted, as a resolution is. Thank you very much. Opposed? I want to pay a special thank you to Mr. Barnett for introducing this letter and drafting this letter for us and on our behalf. Thank you, sir, for doing that. And we're back to the floor. Member Solar, I'm sorry. Member Johnson, is this about this letter? Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's about the topic. I just want to ask, more directing this to Ms. Schaefer. When you go to the Board of Health, one of the things that I've seen as a big barrier, and I hope that you guys are discussing, I am sure you are discussing, is if we're going to be taking on a site, if the county is that we locate it in a place that does not require an individual car, that people can get there either by foot or by another means of transportation. I see you nodding your head, so I'm glad you guys are looking at that. I think that is one of the big barriers, and we want to make sure that everybody has equal access to testing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? I took the vote. No.
Yes, you
I
did,
did.
sir.
I'm sorry.
It passed. No worries.
Go back.
No worries.
Okay, thank you, Member Stoller.
Thank
Anything
you,
else?
Mr. Chair. That's all we have on the executive committee. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let's go on to the report of the Finance Committee. It looks like you have the floor again, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finance has 4 items today. First one, B1A, request approval of an ordinance by the McLean County Board, amending the McLean County Code, specifically Chapter 108, Personnel Policies Procedure, Article 5, Position Classification Plan and Pay Plan, Section 46, Overtime Payments. I make that motion.
Motion by Chairman Solner. Is there a second? Second by Member Smith. Comments or questions? All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. And opposed? Motion's carried.
Next item is B1B, request approval of a resolution establishing the budget policy for the fiscal year 2021. I so move.
Motion by Chairman Solner, second by Member Metzger. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? Motion's carried. Member Erickson, do you have a comment?
That was opposed.
Okay, thank you. Please write the record, show Member Erickson opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Solner, you have the floor. Motion is carried.
Item B1C, request approval of a Schedule A calendar for preparation of the fiscal year 2021 budget 5-year capital improvement budget and the recommend 3-year budget. I make that motion.
Motion by Chairman Soldner, second by Member Chung. Comments or questions? All in favor, please raise your right hand. And opposed? Motion is carried.
Last item is B1D, request approval of an ordinance of the McLean County Board establishing the annual salary of the circuit clerk, auditor, and coroner. I so move.
Motion by Chairman Soldner. Is there a second? Member Beard, second by Member Beard. Comments or questions or discussion? Member Casey.
I am opposed to not giving the coroner and the clerk of the circuit court an increase in salary, if not this year, on the second, third, or fourth years of their terms, to freeze their salaries at the present amount seems to me to be short-sighted, and I think we have to look at it from a long-range thing, and we're not doing that. And I think we're doing it in response to the current coronavirus problems. And I don't think that those problems are going to remain with us for the entire 4 years of these people's terms. And I think that the coronavirus at least aggravates the problems with the coroner's office, because the coroner has to investigate a number of these deaths. So I'm opposed to it, and I would like to suggest that we spend some more time on this. If we're going to meet next week, perhaps we can meet and talk about this as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Nguyen?
I'll tell you, I will move to this motion to be moved to a tabled to the meeting on, what day is that we're going to have that meeting?
May 28th.
May 28th, because I feel the same as the judge does on that, and I think we should think this over before we vote, because they should deserve some salary increases during this period of time. So I would move to table that to the meeting on 13th.
Motion by Member Went to table to a date certain of May 28th. Is there a second? Second by Member Casey. Comments or questions? We'll take a motion on this. Member Gordon, comment.
Actually, it's a point of order, Mr. Chairman. The communication that we have received from County Clerk Kathy Michael indicated that the meeting on May 28th was being called for a specific purpose. I think I want to ask the chair and anyone else that you'd care to consult with. It seems to me that we can't expand the purpose of that meeting given the specificity of County Clerk Michael's email to us today.
Thank you for that point. I'm going to have to ask for clarification on that. Member Went, wait one moment, please, and then I'll call on you after we get a clarification on this point of order. Thank you.
So the state statute, the county board rules mirrors the state statute that specifically directs the county clerk. Well, let me back up. That directs any county board member wishing to have a special meeting scheduled to specify the nature of that special meeting. That's what triggered the notice sent by Ms. Michael, and that's what's triggered us to we will create an agenda based on that notice and the letters that she received. So I'd recommend against expanding that, as George Gordon said. If people, or let me say this, if 7 members of the board wanted to send a letter to expand that, that would be the cleanest way to do it. So that's my advice. Chairman, any other questions?
And no, and if that were to happen, then it would happen to happen within a certain date.
we'd have to do it. I mean, she'd have to follow the exact same process. Receive 7 letters, send a written notice to the board, publish in a newspaper in the county. But given the statutory language that triggers the special meeting, I just recommend expanding that because it wasn't in the 7 letters that were sent to Ms. Michael. So
Thank you. Member Went, I think you were next.
Yeah, I'm just wondering from Don Knapp, as if we have the votes tonight to change and expand that meeting, can we do it by a unanimous vote or a vote of 7 or a vote?
Unfortunately,
of our board?
Unfortunately, Mr. Went, the state statute's incredibly clear that she needs something in writing sent by the board members. So I would hate to ignore that statute and our county board rules, which mirror that statute.
The other question I have.
Amend right now.
I know we have to set these salaries a certain date prior to the election. And will we have time enough to get a special meeting to do this within that period of time? Do you know what it is?
I do know that it's 6 months, but I'd have to pull my calendar out and look at it. I think it's either exactly 180 days or 6 months. I've got my computer fired up and I can answer that in a little bit. I don't know if Jessica's is listening to this and online or not, but I have to get a calendar out and count backwards. We've always done it in May because we know May works. I just gotta go see when the term starts and start counting backwards, George. So you'd have to give me a little bit of time to figure that out.
Well, can we postpone voting on this until Don comes back with the date so that we have an idea of if we can get the letters and that together to have a special meeting to review this?
Let me get a couple more comments, make a decision on moving this down on the agenda. First, please, Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to ask Mr. Knapp what the timeline is for scheduling a special meeting. And do we have enough time to do that and still be ahead of the deadline for a vote on the salaries?
Yeah, you need at least 48 hours and to publish in the Panagraph, which I believe Ms. Michael could get done, but no sooner than 48 hours because we'd have to get an agenda out like everything. If you want to lay this on the table and do your other business and give me a minute and then take it off the table after I've looked at this, that might be a great way to handle this, but.
Okay, I'll move to lay it on the table.
Well, one more comment and then Member Woolrab, do you have a comment? I think you had your hand.
Do we have a motion on the table right now? though?
Yes.
On the floor, sorry.
Yeah.
Motion table, the dates are.
I'm just gonna move this down on the agenda. We have an existing motion in the second right now until we get a ruling on this. And I'll move it down under item 8 under other business. We currently have a motion in the second.
Yes, we do.
And I'll take a vote on this after we get a ruling. And I'll move it down to item 8 after we complete other business. And we'll bring this back to you, first of all, from a ruling from Mr. Knapp, and then I'll take a vote. And I'll need somebody to read it back at that time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Member Solder?
No, Mr. Chairman, that's all we have on our agenda. I would be glad to answer any other questions other than dealing with the salary of the circuit clerk, the auditor, and the coroner.
Thank you. Let's move on then to the report of the Health Committee. Chairmember Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health Committee has no items for action today, and our general report can be found on pages 2 through 6 of the unapproved minutes packet.
Thank you. We'll move on to item D, Land Use and Development Committee report. Chairman Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Land Use and Development Committee brings no items for action. Our general report can be found on pages 28 through 38 of the unapproved minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go on to the Transportation Committee report and Chairman Kaisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have one item to present, and that is a request for approval of a capital assistance grant for show bus. And the amount of the grant is $881,400 for new equipment. And I move that.
Motion by Chairman Kaisley, second by Member Smith. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed. The motion has carried.
Our general report is found in the unapproved minutes on pages 7 to 10.
Okay, sir, thank you. Let's go to the Property Committee report. Chairman Barnett. I already moved it down to 8. Member Barnett?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property Committee brings forward no items for action to the board this month. One item of information that I would just mention to everyone, I brought this up at Executive Committee meeting last week. It looks like we'll be unable to open Glazner Beach at Kamlara Park this summer, even if reopening plans do allow. Right now, the Red Cross is not certifying or recertifying lifeguards this year, and lifeguards are a very important component of being able to run a safe and healthy beach. So if that were to change at some point with the summer, of course, we'll keep all of you updated, but just wanted to mention that to the board.
Thank you for that information. Appreciate it. Let's go on to the report of the Justice Committee. Chairman Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Justice Committee brings two items for action to the board this evening. Item G1A, request approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Department of Health Care and Family Services for the state's attorney's office, pages 135 through 158, and I'll move that.
Motion by Chairman Gordon. Is there a second? Second by Member Bloomfield. Comments or questions? All in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried.
Thank you. Item G1B, request approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Department of Health Care and Family Services for the Circuit Clerk's Office, found on pages 159 through 178, and I'll move that.
Motion by Chairman Gordon. Is there a second? Second by Member Johnston. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Motion is carried.
We have no other business for action. Our general report can be found in the unapproved minutes on pages 11 through 15, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. We'll go on to the report of the County Administrator, Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chairman. I bring forth item H1A. It's an item to be presented for action, which is request approval of McLean County, Illinois, return to work recommended guidelines, business ordinance. This was brought forth to me from Member Erickson. It is located on pages 179 through 188 of your packet.
Is there a motion? Any comments? And the motion, Member Erickson.
Yeah, I just thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to make a motion to advance it. I just wanted to say that yesterday I did sign a letter addressed to our county clerk, Kathy Michael, requesting a special meeting of the McLean County Board on Thursday, May 28th to consider the following. A resolution for immediate implementation of the Restore Heart of Illinois plan authored by the City of Peoria, Peoria County, and the Peoria City County and Health Department. I had a conversation with Mr. Knapp today. No one seemed to know whether I had to withdraw it or where I had to file a motion or what, make a motion or what we had to do to get it off the floor. But that was the issue. It's my preference that I just withdraw it. But if the chair would prefer to have a motion, I will make a motion to withdraw it.
Member Erickson, who originally originated the motion has chosen to withdraw it and will withdraw that motion without objection. Is there any objection at this time? If none, then we'll consider that motion, item H1A, to be withdrawn from the agenda. Thank you very much. Ms. Rodriguez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say briefly to the membership, just as a part of my general report, that I continue to be honored to serve McLean County. The department heads and all of our 800 plus employees are just putting forth the utmost amazing dedication in working during this time of the coronavirus. And I don't do justice to all that I could say about individual examples, but I wanted to acknowledge all of our amazing employees during this time. So thank you for the floor in that regard.
Thank you very much. We will move on to other business. Is there any other business and communication at this time? If none,
Member Soldner has his hand up.
Member Solmer. That's a hand, right?
Thank you very much. Again, I know we are going to meet later to talk about the opening of McLean County, but I just wanted to mention that as many emails I've gotten about the whole coronavirus issue and dealing with video conferencing at the jail and housing plan, I've gotten more about from my members of my district of reopening the county. So I'm glad to see we're going to meet again to talk about it. I hope we can make a decision on that day because it is important. The rural part of the county, the small businesses, the small villages are hurting. The mayors have met. They've done a good job of trying to come together to agree to a plan. And so I just hope we do something when we meet again. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Member Schaefer?
I think at this time I'd like to ask if Mr. Knapp would address the issue as to why we're meeting next week and why the Board of Health is meeting, and explain it to everyone to make sure everybody is clear as to the process here.
Yeah.
I guess, Susan, I've got to ask a little clarification. When you say why you're meeting, it's my understanding, and I haven't seen an agenda. I only got to see part of the Board of Health meeting last Wednesday, where I believe it was stated, and I don't know who stated it, that the Board of Health would like to weigh in on any potential plan that the county board would endorse for the reopening of McLean County. Is that accurate? And so it's my understanding that's why the Board of Health was going to meet. Mr. Erickson proposed a plan. He's withdrawn that plan to give the Board of Health the time to meet. I think that is incredibly wise for a million different reasons that I can go into if you really want me to, but it's my understanding that's why the Board of Health is going to meet, isn't it?
I just was, I don't know, on the issues of where the lines are drawn on what the county board can do versus the Board of Health. And I think that was what I wanted, maybe more the explanation as the relationship between those two when it comes to something like.
So, my review of, regardless, and I've had conversations with Carlo and Chuck and anybody who's called and asked, and Ms. McKnight and I have started conversations over the last week to see when the Board of Health, and I should say not necessarily the Board of Health, but when the Health Department would seek to enforce anything, when they would seek to quarantine somebody, when they would seek to shut a business down, when they would seek to isolate somebody. And with a lot of plans in place, with a lot of resolutions in place, my assessment of where the law is that it's the Illinois Department of Public Health Act that controls everything. Specifically, the Illinois Department of Public Health Act says that the Illinois Department of Public Health and local health departments are, and I don't want to mix the mix the language up. I believe the term is the supreme authority in matters of quarantine and isolation. So I think it's incredibly wise, as the board has decided to do, to let the supreme authority in matters of isolation and quarantine weigh in on when they think isolation and quarantine is appropriate. And so that is my understanding of why the Board of Health is going to meet.
Mr. Chairman, you have some folks wanting to speak, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Jim, take over.
He's coming. He's coming.
It's a coup. I guess I didn't see who was first, but Carlo, I see your hands up, so I'm going to let you speak first.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Member Schaefer, and thank you, Don, for the background. We did have I thought, a really good conversation, because I was trying to get a better understanding of the relationship between the McLean County Board, the Board of Health, and the Health Department. So let me just make sure I understood some of my takeaways. One of them was that the McLean County Board, like county boards across the state, does not have the jurisdiction, does not have the authorization to pass an ordinance that would compel the Health Department to do something unless the Board of Health approved it. Is that an accurate statement?
You know, that's a complicated issue, Carlo, as we discussed. I think we talked for 40 or 50 minutes. There is the Board of Health has total operational control over the Health Department, over the running of the Health Department. So you are correct that there's nothing that well, I shouldn't say nothing. There's nothing operationally that the county board could do to force the Health Department to do something or not to do something. And I probably just muddied those waters, but correct. And we've had, whether we're talking about years ago when animal control was under the direction of the Board of Health, we've had these conversations numerous times. Taking COVID out of the equation, the Board of Health has total operational control over the health department.
And I guess I just want to make another point, because I think it's relevant, since this has come forward and we're having a special meeting just for the public to understand, is the approach that we're taking is very different from the approach that the authoring agency is taking. The Peoria County Board has not and does not plan to vote to implement the HOI plan. That is being driven completely by their lead public health official, which is Monica Hendrickson, who heads the health department. So this is a very different orientation, one in which the county board and elected officials are driving it, not public health officials. And so I want to just state that that's a big difference between the approaches between the two. And I appreciate that the Board of Health is going to take the time to review this, because it is their authority ultimately, and their opinion that really will dictate how we move this forward.
Lord, thank you. Member Nguyen.
Yes, I think it's very important that we get our businesses open as fast as we can and as safe as we can. And I think the input from the health department would be fine. But I tell you, there is lots of good reasons to get the businesses open as fast as we can. There's a lot of small businesses that are having a really hard time. And under the shutdown, there's been an increase in suicides, increase in alcohol deaths, and so forth. And when people are unemployed and their businesses or their businesses go down, there's a lot of mental problems that occur. And they just had a doctor on that said that the longer you're quarantined to your home, you have lots of problems with mental health that develop. So the sooner we can get people off of quarantine is probably very important from that aspect. And I think it's important that we look at that. I'm glad we're having the health department put some input in. And then I think on our meeting, hopefully we can, with a combination of whatever the health department brings forth, that we can get our businesses open as fast as we can. The state plan is way too slow.
Are there any other comments this time? Just very briefly, I'd like to respond.
Johnston has a.
Let me respond first, please, and then I'll call him Mrs. Johnson. Just for your information, I had a phone conversation today with the chairman of the Peoria County Board. The original plan as was presented to us was created by Ms. Monica Henriksen, the epidemiologist and the director of the board, of the health board in Peoria, along with, in conjunction with, it was introduced in conjunction with the chairman and the mayor of Peoria. Correct, they haven't voted on it yet. They are right now, this week, working on any kind of adaptions or adjustments to this plan. And maybe we'll know more. And I thought it was a very good idea. And thank you, Member Erickson, for agreeing to pull your resolution for us to take time and visit this, get more information as fast as things unfold and see exactly where the HOI plan will be at that time and on by May 28th. So thank you. Was there another comment?
Member Johnston.
Member Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. So in preparation for the meeting next week, there are some clarifications and questions I'd like, if you can't give me the answers tonight, that at least prepare some information for next week. As we have just approved kind of the downstate business stabilization program, if we vote to reopen, if we vote to go for the HOI, does that jeopardize any of the businesses' participation in that? Does it jeopardize any business licenses that might be regulated by state bodies? We will know by next week whether or not we still have a community-based testing site. So having some understanding about what our options will be would be really helpful, because a strong portion of the HOI is that we have community-based testing so that we can keep tabs on what's going on in the community, the spread. And so if there's any potential from the Board of Health for what the backup site might be or what the backup plan might be, and even looking into some of that quarantine housing, if we can find that kind of information out to present for Thursday as we weigh the options and the benefits of moving forward with this HOI. So thank you.
And if you will check with me, I will check with Economic Development Council, and we'll take a look at that, because my answer would be, and I suspect it's going to be on an individual basis as far as any kind of plan, including the one we currently have, Restore Illinois, that we're under right now. I think the amount of money as far as is there from our loan procedures and operation won't make any difference about what plan we're under at this point in time. But I will check and get back to you on that and get a response for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just a matter of my own curiosity, but it's in context of what the special meeting was called to do. Has any other government entity supported immediate implementation? And in connection with that, how much flexibility do we have regarding what we approve at that special meeting? In other words, are we confined to approving or not approving immediate implementation of the plan? My understanding is, and this was supported, I think, by something you just said a little bit ago, that there hasn't been adoption of any plan by, or adoption of a similar resolution by any of the government entities, because it's being driven by the health department in Peoria City and County. So if the meeting that we're having is called to consider immediate implementation, is that our only option? I hope it is not, because I would like a little more flexibility, because we all are facing the tremendously tough choices involved in potentially lives versus livelihoods. And
Want to draft a resolution and has submitted it. So at this point in time, that's what we're going to vote. Now,
So to answer one of your questions, Member Gordon, if I made Chairman McIntyre. I reviewed Madison County's guidelines for the responsible reopening of Madison County. I believe that was a resolution by the Board of Health, although I was unable to confirm that online. The Heart of Illinois plan, as Carlos said, it's at least authored by the city of Peoria, the city county health department, but also claimed by the county and the city. Who drove it? I don't know. I just see the titles that were on the top of it. There is a Clark County resolution that passed Clark County resolution of return to work and recommended guidelines. I believe that was passed by the actual county board. The Adams County Together model plan that I believe was a joint plan between the county and the health department. There is a Pike County plan that I was unable to review beforehand. So I believe the answer to your question is yes, some units of government have attempted to pass their own plan without the involvement of the Board of Health. But as I told Carlo and people we talked to this weekend, in reviewing all of those plans, I found no citation to any statutory authority or any administrative authority that gave those units of government the ability to do so. Similarly, as I review the Restore Illinois plan, I find absolutely no citation to any authority in the beginning of the Restore Illinois plan that says the governor has that authority to just implement that. That's where I go back to the Illinois Department of Public Health Act. Could not be more clear that the supreme authority in matters of isolation and quarantine are the IDPH and the local health departments. So I'd have to, this is all, while this is relatively new in this context, Member Gordon, we are a Dillon's Rule entity, and principles of law that have governed this board forever continue to govern this board regardless of COVID-19. So I'd have to go back, and one of the reasons, quite honestly, letting the health department weigh in. It affords me a little more opportunity to look in exactly what your options are. And so I'll need to research a little bit more to see that. But my preliminary research, and I think it's pretty clear that the health department has been vested with clear statutory authority and a clear statutory process. The question then becomes, when would they exercise their authority to isolate, quarantine, shutter a business? And that remains to be seen.
Member Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a follow-up. I'm glad to hear that you've already done some of the legal research, and I hope that that will continue, because I'm still a little unclear. I'm not 100% clear, but I think I'm about 98% clear on what the authority of the county board is vis-a-vis the authority of the Board of Health as the overseer, if you will, the legislative authorizer for the health department. Yeah. So I think we need to be very careful here about the legal ramifications of what we are trying to accomplish and whether this is the appropriate avenue through which to accomplish it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member Wynn.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that Member Gordon said life versus livelihood. This can be life versus life, because nationally, they've just got some figures out on that. They've had an upswing of suicides, death by alcohol, overuse of alcohol and drugs by about 69,000 over what normally occurred during this particular period. And the virus has killed about 89,000 lives. So we've kind of got a net here about 20 lives. And I think the board ought to know, when they shut down the hospitals and they quit doing colonoscopies and they quit doing mammograms, that there was a drop of 80% of colonoscopies done and 70% of mammograms done. These people are risking their life because they couldn't get the procedures done during that time. My own experience, I think you all know that I've had a 7-year struggle with cancer, and I have complete remission through a new process called CAR-T. And I have complete remission, and I'm about as healthy, 79-year-old, as anybody else now. However, during my time, if the hospitals had been in the position they were during the shutdown, I would be dead, because the types of thing that we noticed, I needed a blood test. When they finally did the blood test, and I had it scheduled for about 3 weeks down the road, and I discovered a sore that I'd seen on cadavers. I grew up in funeral business. I called my doctor, and we had the test done the next day. During the shutdown, I couldn't have gotten that test done the next day, but I did. My doctor got me to the hospital. He called when he got the results, and he wanted me at the hospital at that moment. I got to the hospital. When I was there, they talked about doing another test, but it was going to take 2 days because it had to be sent to Peoria. Instead, they sent me to Peoria, and they started a 28-day regimen of chemotherapy for me. If I had waited that 3 weeks, my doctor said I would have been dead. Then later on, I had a thing with my heart, and they weren't doing these during the shutdown of the hospitals. But I went to the hospital, and within an hour, they had me in the room putting stents in. And so instead of having a serious heart attack, I had no damage to my heart. And this was real important, because after I got cleared, complete remission on the cancer, something happened to me that was not even related. It was called septic shock. Now, what happened was I woke up with a stomach ache. I had my wife take me to the emergency room because of the fact that I had these other things happen to me. Now, during that shutdown of the hospitals, they would have sent me probably home with a stomach ache, or possibly to the primary care. I don't know what they would have done, because they probably could not have taken me into the emergency room. The septic shock hit me, and hit me fast. Within 24 hours, they had me on a ventilator. They had me on that ventilator. We called the people, the research people in Chicago. They talked to the doctor down here, and they discussed the things they could do down here. The University of Chicago could do more things for me. The doctor down here, of course, was worried about how long I was going to be on that ventilator. They wanted to get me off as soon as they could. The doctor in Chicago said, we can do about 7 things up here instead of 3 that you're doing. We'll send a helicopter down for him, which they did. And within the 3 days, they finally got me off the ventilator, because as soon as I got to Chicago, they wanted to get me off the ventilator. These things could not have been done under the hospital shutdown originally, and I would have been dead. So I'm very concerned. The faster we open these businesses, we can avoid possibly some of the other ramifications and unintended consequences of having businesses shut down. So that's my story. And I think it's very important that we work as fast as we can to get our businesses open, because these other unintended things can happen. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to entertain one more. I'm going to shut off this debate for now. This is under other business communication. And so Member Erickson, you have one more final comment, and we're going to move on to this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I would just like to ask, and would like to be passed along to the Board of Health, since we're supposed to pass it on through our liaison, is that there's been many views expressed here, and some are positive for reopening. So I don't think that any views that are expressed before the Board of Health should leave any implication with the Board of Health that the members of the county board are opposed to reopening. The second question I have is to Don. Did the courts define matters of isolation and quarantine? I bet that would be some exciting reading if you could let me know. If that's ever been done. And then the third question is, what is the authority of the county board? Let's say that the health department says, yeah, we can do this, but can you appropriate for us X amount of dollars? Can we do that as well? Because I think there would be some willingness upon on the members to do that if the health department might request such. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so I haven't well, I have looked. Isolation, you isolate people who are positive with the disease and you quarantine people who may be positive with the disease. Until 2005, the Illinois Department of Public Health Act simply said that the local health departments and the IDPH were the supreme authority in matters of quarantine. For some reason, they added isolation and quarantine in 2005. That's not particularly clear to me why they've done that, but I have started to look into that, Chuck. And then, of course, you could amend your budget if the Board of Health comes back and says, and pick a plan, Restore Illinois, Heart of Illinois, no plan immediately open, but we need X number of dollars to implement whatever plan is out there. You could, of course, come back and amend your budget to provide them that revenue stream.
All right, thank you. We're going to move back now to Finance Committee item B1D. You would remain at the podium, sure. For one clarification on where we are on the amount of time that we would still have to act on salary.
You would need to act by June 3rd to be safe. You need to act by June 3rd, or on the 3rd or before the 3rd. So there's no reason why if 7 new letters showed up in the county clerk's office relatively soon, we couldn't add that to the already scheduled meeting. But without that, I would hesitate to change why that meeting has been called, because that's a statutory requirement. And I'd be happy to help people draft those letters if they I mean, we've done that before. Not forget the number. When we did Brant, when we did a number of things, we drafted the letters, had them sitting at the counter. People came in and signed them right after a meeting. So
then I cannot entertain a motion to table.
Can't really entertain a motion to table till a date certain, but you can still lay it on the table and potentially take it off at that meeting, if that's what you want to do, or you could amend it or vote it up.
Third meeting?
No, the special meeting of Thursday. You're gonna lay it on the table. Once it's laid on the table, it sits there until somebody takes it off.
Okay.
Yeah. But the problem is there's a deadline for taking action on this.
Yeah, by June 3rd. So if we don't get to 7 letters,
then
you'd have to call a different.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment about this, please?
Just a minute, sir. One moment. Before we do that, there's no way that this can be done.
Oh, sure.
Sure, you could just call another special meeting.
Do 7 more letters.
Yeah. With 7 more, then I'll answer this question, sir, Member Robustelli. With 7 more letters, if this was tabled, it could be brought up for action. It would require a special meeting to do so because of the deadline of June 3rd for this to be able to be enacted upon so that these salaries take effect. And that was the clarification that we needed. So at that point in time, we're debating a motion to table right now. Member Robustelli?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand Member Wendt's position. So Member Wendt, his position is that we should move this to a time certain. We just discovered that we cannot do that on the 28th because that meeting is, the subject of that meeting has already been predetermined. And
That's
so we would have another special meeting after an item went through 2 standing committees and with the knowledge that our county faces tremendous revenue losses, up to 50% of sales tax. The estimate was $150,000 to $200,000 in losses in interests. The the range of spectrum of potential budget implications going into the next couple of years is tremendous. And so Member Wen is proposing that we take a special meeting to increase the salaries of 2 elected department heads who make over $100,000 a year by 3%. That is absurd. I will vote no to do that. If he would like to change the salaries, he should make a motion, get a second, and we can vote on it now. It just seems crazy that we're entertaining this motion.
We have a motion to table first, then we have the regular motion that's in the agenda. We would take a motion to table first, and we have a motion and second for that. Member Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern would be at this point, at least in part procedural. If we were to, I could picture a scenario where we don't take it off the table on May 28th. If we leave it to that, we decide not to take it off the table, then we have no motion on salaries. So I would agree with Member Robustelli, maybe not for the identical reason, but I think we ought to act tonight.
Well, we are acting tonight. We're voting on a motion to table right now, and I have nothing else that I can do. I don't know what other course of action we've got to go right now on it. Okay, so at that point in time, I want to repeat now, we're having a motion to table, and that's the date. There's no date certain for that, and there won't be unless 7 letters are submitted for a special meeting to take action on it to our clerk's office. If that's the case, if not, if the motion fails, then we're going back and we're going to vote on a regular resolution. Now, question is, you're asking is what happens after if the motion is tabled and there's nothing done on it, then no action is taken.
But then sir, excuse me, with your indulgence, what happens if we don't take action on approving those salaries?
The salaries are not implemented, so it's a point well taken that we must vote tonight on, or we're not going to be able to meet the deadline to implement the salaries, and that's where we are. So right now we're a motion to table.
Mr. Chairman.
Member Wen.
I'd just like to say, get a raise of hands of those that would send a letter so that we know we have a special meeting so we can review this salary. We're very fortunate. We have a highly qualified person as the coroner, and I hope she's going to win because we need this highly qualified. I've never seen a county have as qualified coroner in my 70 years. I spent a lot of time in relationships to coroners growing up in the funeral business. So I would like to see a hands raised that would be sending the letters to have a special meeting so that we can actually review both of those salaries. So I'm going to raise my hand. There's 7 of us.
Well, it's just because of procedural question, Member Gordon. Okay, the straw poll says no. At that point in time, then I see no reason to allow a motion to table that's on the floor because there's absolutely procedural no reason to operate. So I'm going back to the regular resolution that was presented, which is B1D. I know this is confusing. I hope we're okay. Motion, raise the hands that I'm going to take is all in favor of B1D. Raise your hand. That's approving the resolution that's in your packet as presented. Opposed?
Can we get a roll call vote?
Yes, you may. Thank you.
I'm so. We're voting on keeping the salaries flat. Is that correct?
You are voting on a resolution as presented in your packet.
Yes, ma'am.
Which is keeping the salaries flat.
So a yes vote means keep them flat. Thank you.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And
anyone else?
And it was the 80,600 for the coroner.
It's what's in order.
Yeah. Okay.
It's what's worded in the packet.
So a yes vote is to pass the thing that's in the packet, no vote is to vote against it.
All right.
Josh Barnett? Yes or no? Raise your hand or thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jacob Beard?
Yes.
Thank you. Lindsay Bloomfield? No. William Casely?
No.
Sharon Chung?
Yes.
Chuck Erickson?
Yes.
William John Friedrich?
No.
George Gordon?
Yes.
Elizabeth Johnston?
Yes.
Randall Martin?
Yes.
Catherine Metzger?
Yes.
Carlo Robustelli?
Yes.
Susan Schaefer?
Yes.
Logan Smith?
Yes.
James Soldner?
Yes.
Gerald Thompson?
Yes.
Shayna Wachinski?
Yes.
Thank you. George Wendt?
No.
Lori Woolrab?
Yes.
Did you want to vote, John?
No, I don't need to vote.
He's not voting.
Doesn't matter either way. Okay. What do you have?
I have 4 no's, and so then that would be, oh my goodness, my math.
15
15
yeses.
yeses.
15 yeses, 4 noes. The motion carries. I have nothing else at this time except to pay bills on our agenda. I have bills submitted to me, reviewed, and approved by their auditor in the amount of $4,249,279.07. Is there a motion to approve bills? Motion by member Casely. Is there a second? Second by member Bluefield. All in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed. Motion is carried. I have nothing else at this time. Meeting is adjourned.